Hi everybody, my name is Nirit, and yes, it's many things, passion, interest. I used to volunteer in many organizations, including ARDC, and now I'm actually doing research with another colleague from Haifa University on the subject. And I'm interested in particular in Israeli policy, so the question is particularly to Anat, right? And yes, I have many questions, but I'll just ask one for now, which is that what I'm curious to understand is that my understanding is that according to the convention, if the refugee status is individualized, and then once you're a refugee, you have all those rights, you have the right to all those rights that the convention decides on, health and so on. But what I'm trying to understand is how does one become a refugee? You understand? Like if I go to Canada now and I say I am a refugee, am I a refugee or to Europe or anywhere it is, how does one become a refugee? Yeah, that would be my question.
Well, it's a good question. In theory, you know, as lawyers we are taught that you are a refugee not because someone said you are a refugee, but you are a refugee because by what happened to you, you fulfill the definition of a refugee. So I think this is one of the downsides of the Refugee Convention, that it provides us with a definition of who is a refugee. And we know that a refugee is a person who is outside his country of nationality or his habitual residence, and that he have well-founded fear of being persecuted for one of the 5 grounds, which is nationality, religion, a particular social group, political opinion, and race. So there is a definition. And you are supposed to be a refugee, but the fact that something terrible has happened to you, you've been persecuted, or you have the fear that if you go back you'll be persecuted for one of. But, as a matter of practicality, all over the world, to get those rights, as you say, you have to be recognized. So in a way, there should be some sort of a procedure where we reveal the facts, the self-evident fact that you're a refugee. And when I'm saying this is a downside of the convention, is that the convention, and I think intentionally, did not want to dictate any sort of procedure. Because the idea was that you have so many countries signing this one convention with different legal and bureaucratic traditions that you cannot just say, this is how it is done. So in a way, and this is I think a bit the sad part, that it was left for the sort of the goodwill of the government. And this is where I think Israel is failing the asylum seekers. Because we have in Israel what we call administrative law. We have a large body of law. When I come, for example, to the municipality and I seek a license for something, there are rules. Some of them are written, some of them are non-written. But there is rule of how I should be heard, and how the authority should gather information, and how a decision-making process, a fair decision-making process should take place. And somehow for the refugees it doesn't work. And I'll give you a brief example because I don't want to talk too much in question and answers. But for example, one of our clients was in a refugee status determination interview a week ago. And this person was tortured. And he said that when he was tortured, he was blindfolded. So he didn't see what was happening in the room, but he said, I estimate by my hearing that there were 5 or 6 people who were there and they were beating me and so on. And then the interviewer said, well, in the last interview, he said there were 6 or 7 people. How do you explain this discrepancy? You see, so this is something that, as a lawyer, it's very difficult for me to tackle. Because every minute detail that he said, you know, from one interview in a different way in the second interview, he's a liar. And that's how they fail the asylum seekers here. And this is something that is not in the convention. It goes down to the common sense of the judge at the end of the day. And whether or not the judge would say, oh, the Ministry of Interior gave them perfect training and I rely on their expertise, or is the judge industrious enough to read 70 pages of protocol and to say, this is ridiculous. This is not a contradiction. When a person is blindfolded, how can he know if it was 5 or 6 people or 6 or 7 people? I hope I answered. Yeah? You have another 4.
We will come back for the other 3. Over here. And then I have one over there, am I right? And at the back.
Yeah, my name is Jean-Marc, and I'm on the board of ASSAF, and also work for the Joint Distribution Committee. I guess my question, maybe Anat, you might want to, I mean, I said this to you in the break, that I agree with everything in your presentation, but maybe with a perspective of, my perspective is a bit different, that I believe in incremental change, and that maybe we are going towards a more positive reality. And I wonder if what you might react to that. But my question is to Jens. You spoke about all the various policy levels that are trying to limit or close off Europe, basically, to the possibility of migration and asylum seekers getting status. But short of showing all the policies that are trying to stop, I'm curious what you see as potential policies that would have a controlled migration, and short of opening up the borders completely, and I don't know if this is what you're suggesting, but are there coherent policies that can be practiced in Europe that are both generous enough to guarantee the respect of human rights and refugee rights, and at the same time control the borders enough in a way that make the European populations feel more confident?
Okay, I mean, it's a difficult question. So the question is how to, what would be the target of human rights border policy, or how to change the border? I mean, I think there are 2 levels to answer this question. One level is the question if it is possible to have a border which is a border where human rights are accepted totally. I don't think that this is possible. I think that borders are a fundamental problem, and that it is a kind of, or that we will have in every border problems with human rights. So the first level would be to question the border as a principle of social organization. The second level would be, of course, we know border is not the same in different states. So I don't know, the border of Israel is different to the border of Europe, or the border in Spain even is different to the border in Greece or in Italy, and there are very big differences, and also human rights differences. And I think this depends on the social forces which we can find in the situations. I mean, there were a lot of successful mobilizations to blame Frontex, for example, and they have had effect, and this is changing something. I mean, this is changing something in the right way. So I would think that we have to fight in this sense to change or to secure that the rights which are still existing are implemented, even if it's impossible to know, as I tried to mention, what is happening in the high sea. It's very difficult to observe that, to control it, but anyway, there are movements, social movements, which try to organize even ships to follow Frontex, etc. And I think this is a very important work, but then we have to pose the question more fundamentally and to ask what is the reason why do we have borders, and is it possible to have a border which is a human right border? And I mean, the question is the term of a refugee. I mean, juridically, you will never be a refugee if you are moving for economical reasons. But why? The question is why? What's the reason? How can you justify that somebody who is moving for economical reasons, maybe in near to the Canary Islands, where I mean Europe, for example, has a lot to do. Why the people there lost their bases? For example, the fishermen, the European industry of fishing were fishing all the coast there, and what was happening? The people there said, "Okay, I have a boat, but now I can't fish anymore, so I have to get my money by transferring people to the Canary Islands, and they pay me." So I think we have to think in this sense more fundamentally, and well, on the one side we have to change step by step and find that that we can control this apparatus, and the other side we have to question these terms, these juridical terms, because I don't understand why somebody who has to move for economical reason is not a refugee. There's no reason for me.
Over here, there was a question. In the green shirt, right? I just want to, this is something I know we're all fascinated by, and especially our speakers have a lot of information to share with us, but I would like to encourage us all to be brief, and also for the speakers to hold the microphone closer to their mouths.
I'm Benny. I'm just taking an interest in the field, nothing working or volunteering. I have a brief practical question to Anat. You mentioned that the border area is closed off to, I suppose, what the helping organizations like ASSAF, etc. Why is it really closed off? Because I know that at least the number 12 highway is accessible to civilians, so I just had this idea of maybe having some sort of citizens patrol along the border to sort of shadow the IDF's work there, or is the whole area like a closed off military zone? Just a practical.
It's interesting because I think as just what Jens said about following the boats, there were ideas, I don't think they were ever materialized, of shadowing the IDF activities by human rights activists. I don't think it was implemented. As far as I know now, after the bombing or the terror attack of August, it is declared, at least at night, to be a closed military territory. And I cannot imagine that they will let the activists with camera run after them and see what they're doing. I do think, by the way, that IDF soldiers are a good way, if we can get to them, good way to know what's going on there. They have been in the past, so we need to maybe work on that direction.
Right at the back. And then I see you.
Run!
Okay, thank you. My name is Kida. Yeah.
No, it's not on. Right before?
Sorry. My name is Kidane Isa from the Eritrean refugees community. Okay, my question is gonna be forwarded to I don't know, maybe Anat, lawyer Anat. You said that the refugee, the number of recognized refugees in Israel is 0.2%, and this data was, I believe, before the arrival of most African refugees. And at the beginning of our arrival to Israel, our issue was taken by the UNHCR, which is the biggest humanitarian organization. And they believed that, and they knew that the refugee recognition character of the state was really, like none, but they agreed to swap the refugees to the hand of the state, which they knew that the state will never give any recognition for the refugees. So what do you think, why we are always trying to ignore that, the role of the biggest humanitarian organizations in Israel, from what I experienced. And at some point, I believe that these organizations are, in a way, keeping the democratic character of the state, I mean Israel, because they are not playing their role as they should play, basically. I know your answer, the answer that you could give to me, because you might say to me that the office wants to push the state to deal, with its humanitarian obligations. But I would like to see or hear much further clarification from lawyers like you, or whatever. Thank you.
I think UNHCR is it's a body that is always criticized from both directions. The state is critical of UNHCR for example, urging it not to deport Eritrean refugees, and the NGOs and the refugees themselves are critical of UNHCR for not doing enough to protect them. But I think, as you pointed out in your question, that UNHCR, according to its mandate, is supposed to assist governments in fulfilling their obligations under the convention. When UNHCR kicks in, as it did in Israel before, when the government is failing the refugees, then, for example, UNHCR would do RSD instead. In some cases, maybe UNHCR would undertake resettlement if the country does not provide proper protection. I share your criticism. I think the office in Israel has been working for many years alongside with the government, and I think that the office is not critical enough. When we talk to them, they definitely say that behind the curtains they do a lot of work, and that this is an important work. And sometimes, by the way, I have to agree, we see the fruit of these negotiations, and they fear that if they will become more vocal or more critical, they will lose these sort of diplomatic venues. But I must say again, as an Israeli lawyer, my business is with the Israeli government and not with UNHCR. And also as an Israeli citizen, I want my government to treat refugees as it should under the Refugee Convention. And if UNHCR can help me, I'm happy with their help, but I am not looking anymore to UNHCR to assist. And I must say, the way that it works now in Israel, I don't think the refugees either should look to UNHCR. It's all in the government's hands, and it takes some time to digest. It's a recent change. It's only since 2009, but today it's in the government's hand, and we have to bring our argument to the government.
Over here in the beige jacket.
My name is Yassine from Abu Dhabi Netherlands in Israel. I have 2 comments and 1 question quickly. The first is about the first speech. I think the European, they are who initiated the human rights laws, and now they thinking how to overcome what they initiated already. About one of the things that you mentioned, that some European countries are signing agreement with some countries to return their people back. Last year, we had a Kori being sent back from UK. His name is Muhammad Adam. And the moment he arrived his home in Niala, he being shot by the security, being shot to death by the Sudanese security. This is the four people being sent back from UK. The other comment is about the second speech. When the Israeli government claimed that we're supposed to seek asylum seeker in the first country, I don't think that they forgot when the Sudanese protest in front of the UN in Egypt, asking about their rights, asking the UN to open their files, and the Egyptian government attacked them, and only after that the Sudanese started coming to Israel in a big group. So this, I think, when hundreds of Sudanese being killed there in front of UN office, and thousands being deported back to Sudan, is not something to be forgotten. My question is about the situation here in Israel. We know that the government is building this fence, and building the detention, the rubber camp. So I'm asking the human rights groups, what's their plan for after, when the government will stop, proceeding work visas. And as you see, like now, when everyone is coming to this room, you see the situation of the people who are in the entrance here, and there's 300 sleeping in the park in the rain. So, what's your future plan? You will still trying to find solution locally here in Israel, or you might think, to take this case overseas? Maybe it will be a better solution for these people. Thank you.
I wish I had a good answer to that one.
Can I make a suggestion? Can we keep that particular question of what next, maybe for a broader group discussion once we are finished with Q&A? It's an acceptable suggestion. I think it's a great starting point for a broader discussion. So maybe everybody that has heard the question, that is listening, can think in their minds, what next? And in 10 minutes or so, once we are finished with the burning questions, we can open it for a broader discussion. What do you think, Anat? Yeah? Behind in the gray, next to you, and then here, I see you, and then I see you also.
Hi, my name is Taj. I am also from Darfur. I'm part of the Darfur organization. In fact, I have a lot of questions, but I will try to ask 3 of them. The first question is about the border that both speakers mentioned. I just want to know what is the status of refugee within the time that he's crossing the border. Is he supposed to be as a legal person then to cross the border, or what is the status of the refugee in general, crossing the border? The second question is about the policy. I'm here since 2008, and as Anat mentioned that there were some different kind of policies towards refugee. My question is why this government policy is not related to the convention, UN Convention of 1951. Is there any doubt of, having the question from the convention, or what is the reason behind, giving the policies according to what they think, not according to what is in 1951? My next question is, as we can see, the situation here is totally bad, and we know that it is kind of shameful to blame somebody, because all of us, we know that somebody is dying because he has no place to stay. But that's not a matter. My question is, within the defense that the government is building, and within the detention center, and as we know that there are human rights organizations working with the refugee community, do we have some sort of solution to the, like as an international organizations to solve this problem, not to people whom are not allowed to come, but for the people that they are living in that bad situation and they may be stopped from working? Thank you.
Well, I try to be brief about the position in the border, of asylum seeker. Again, if people could have legal advice before crossing borders, I would say, once you cross, just say, asylum, asylum, I need asylum, my life is in danger, or so on, or any sort of phrase that will express any fear of going back. That is supposed to trigger the convention and to not allow them to return you. And again, as we talked here, both of us, it doesn't always work, but that's in theory what asylum seekers should do. About why Israel does not act according to the convention, well, in the court they say, and this is maybe, Jean-Marc told, we should also see the good things and not only be the pessimist. It's a good thing that the State of Israel always say, we are bound by the Refugee Convention. Even if we didn't legislate it, we act according to the convention. So basically, it's a debate about interpretation. I would agree on one thing. Basically, they respect the non-refoulement principle in most cases. Okay, the border is a problem. We talked about the hot returns. And by the way, Ben Gurion is a problem, because some people land in Ben Gurion, they're stopped and they're sent back, and nobody even knows that this has happened. But the fact that Israel does not return the Eritrean and the Sudanese is a measure of respect to the principle. The fact that it gives terrible procedures and sends everyone else, I think that's a violation of it. And I think the last question is a question we saved for later, or what can be done. Okay, so I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you. Bernd in the front here. And I see you. I've seen you. I have not forgotten about you. And also.
Okay, my question is also for Anat. It's about this thing you have with the pessimistic, optimistic, but I want to give it another turn, which is, like if you look at the European migration and refugee policies over the last, 40, 50 years, there's also this element that they have never worked. Like it has never led to the consequences which were promised before. Actually, often, but this is a long history, they have led to the exact opposite effect. And that's something which makes me very optimistic, which basically says migration, in the broadest sense, is not governable by nation states per se. That it has a lot of bad effects, and people are suffering and dying, okay, granted, but ultimately it doesn't seem to be so easy. And I think one can usually ask, why is this happening like this? I think one example is the US-Mexican border, which the United States government has been trying for the last, say, 90 years of closing that border. It has not worked for a long time because the employers in the south of the United States, they were very much willing to have an exploitable, illegalized workforce, and they were actually fighting very strongly to keep the border open. I think you can make a similar case for Europe in many respects, like the Spanish-Moroccan border was open for a very long time because of the plantations in the south, and now that it's closed, I think one has to look at it. It's probably about the EU accession programs and all this. I think one can explain it. But generally there's this idea of quick fixes, which means basically so much stuff is happening around migration. There are so many different interests involved that even a government, which is supposed to be very much in power, cannot always make the proper predictions and find the proper solution. Now you were saying that kind of the Israeli government is doing quick fix on speed and trying to be really, really fast. Don't you see a chance that this is not working, that this whole process, like the 2011 legislation you were explaining, that it might really have an adverse effect which has not been predicted by the government strategists? Like, I don't know, is there not a need in Israel for migrant workforce? So is there not actually another social actor which is kind of has an interest which is not aligned with the Israeli government on that? I think this is also very much about the question, how much can you compare Israel and Europe? That's very interesting. Thank you.
Before Anat answers, I just want to have a quick commercial break. This is Bernd. If you liked what he had to say, or it made you interested, he will be speaking on Tuesday, and I hope to see you all here.
I liked what Bernd said. And I really pray that this is how it will work out. I must say that I think already I can see that some of the government plans cannot succeed. I see it. I mean, for example, this detention center. It is planned to hold 10,000 people. And they think that if they hold people for 3 years, as I said, people will stop coming. So first thing we know, we already have experience. And I said, we have people in this room that said a year and a half, and people came and came. We have also the fact that now people are coming at the rate of 2,000 per month. So if you build for 10,000, then you have a capacity of 5 months, and that's it, you're finished. And then they say they will enforce the prohibition on employment on everyone, but they can only have 10,000 places there. So what would you do with the other 40,000? And the next step would be that it will cost so much just to keep all the people there in this detention center. So I think you are right, but I think, and I think it goes also to Jean-Marc's question, I think part of maybe my frustration is that sometimes there's a system, it's terrible on the face of it, but you can manipulate that. I think we're getting to that stage. But I think as social activists, we don't want this lie. We want to be able to say, Israel had a fair system, these are the rules, that's what you have to do. And so, I'll just give you, I think it's just an anecdote, but it's really, I'm thinking about it a lot, because in the clinic, as lawyers, it's very difficult to continue day after day after day after day when all your clients are rejected. And I'm working for 10 years, one client recognized as a refugee. It's terrible. And my students say, what are we doing here? So I came to my colleague and I said, look, we are not succeeding. And then he said, no, don't look at it this way. Ask how many of your clients were deported. And then I said, well, actually none so far. So he said, this is success. Okay, so then it's the question, how you define success. So what I'm trying to say, we can today, knock wood, we can work the system. We delay, we file a petition, we go to partnership, we're humanitarian, and the person is not rejected. But the question is this what we want? Will we settle for that sort of agreed lie? And I think for human rights activists it's very difficult. I mean, maybe we should say, okay, be pragmatic, be happy, none were deported. But we want the people in the room saying, yeah, Israel signed the Refugee Convention, and it fulfills the Refugee Convention. And we can't say that today.
My name is Emily Silverman. I teach urban planning and housing policy. And I'm wondering what we can learn from European policies on better practices, almost good practices, once refugees have arrived, whether that's in terms of housing or health or education. Once you've come through, once you're there, what do we know that we can look at and say, we want to do it like that, but in our own version?
I'm not sure. It depends a bit on your situation. I'm not sure. It depends a bit on the situation. If you arrive as a refugee in Europe, it depends where you arrive, in which member state, because there are big differences.
Anything that's good. Go for anything that works.
That works?
Yeah.
Okay, if I go for anything that works, I would go for social movements and human rights movements, which really successfully blamed the practices and which which obligated to to implement the rights. I mean, I was talking about the human rights, the court, the European Court of Human Rights. There was a new judgment which clarified the situation that the interpretation of the member states that they can return in joint operations with African states the refugees in the high sea, and this now is clarified. This is also the result of the social movement of people. I mean, we know that because there were 2 journalists on board, and we know that, and this judgment came because human rights organizations find those people in the camps in Libya, and it was possible to make this. It was possible to make this to go to the Court of Human Rights, and I mean, I don't know exactly what is the thing you can learn of Europe, because if you are illegalized, I mean, then you have no rights, or almost no rights. It depends a bit on the state, because even illegalized or irregular migrants, for example, in Spain, they have some rights. Like what? To go to the social health service, or to go to school for kids, for example. That this is in Spain is possible. In Germany, there is also a decision of a court who said, okay, those kids has to go to school, and so they're starting to even illegalized migrants have now a bit of rights. I mean, it's difficult because those people all the time have to be afraid to ask for their rights, because they can be deported because of their social situation. And okay, there are big differences. Okay, you can see in Greece now we have judgments about the Dublin II regulation, which says that everyone who enters in Europe and came, for example, to Germany, can be deported to the state, the EU member state, where the person entered first. So now we have a judgment of the High Court in Germany, which said the system, there is no asylum system in Greece. This is not possible. It's not, there is no systematic provement of people if people have are politically persecuted. So okay, this was also a success, and in other European countries you have the possibility to be individually proved, and you have more rights. I mean, there's a difference between Spain, for example, and Greece for that reason. Yeah, and maybe I don't know exactly, but what I've heard, a lot of member states, maybe it is a bit better implemented than here, that you have the right to, the individual right to be asked if you are a political refugee. So, and I understand you that this is not the case here. Okay.
Well, one thing about going to school, the one thing that Israel does allow is children of primary education, regardless of the status of the parents, can get schooling. About the right to seek asylum, if you're not Palestinian, or actually, we've been in a training lately, and there was a legal advisor of the Ministry of Interior. She said, "Oh, a Palestinian can come and ask," and we said, "And said, oh, when we will be denied." So basically, the notion is that everyone can ask. If you're Palestinian, you're denied immediately. If you're not Palestinian, you'll be denied after a quick process. And if you're Eritrean or Sudanese, you get conditional release, so you're not individually processed. So basically, you can ask for asylum, but we will not process you, so you can't really ask for it.
I'm taking 3 more questions, and they are hands that I have already seen. So, which is you at the back, and here, and another at the back in the purple. And then we're going to, I'm sorry, but what I want to encourage you is that the people that are here on the stage and the people sitting in front of you in the audience are engaged in the issue. We are here, and we are here, if not in person, we are here on email, and I encourage you afterwards to schmooze, to talk to one another, to exchange contact details, to remain engaged with this subject and with these topics, and see where that takes us into the future. So, over here, in the blue, and then I will take the two at the back. And then I'd like us to open for a broader discussion and relate to the question that was asked twice about where to now.
Okay, thank you. My name is Aviv, and I need to thank my friend for coming in. She brought me here, and thank you for arranging this kind of event. And now, after hearing the question from Emily, I believe, I was wondering, because listening to Jens' lecture, and as I'm living now in Europe, it's quite alarming to hear of such agencies that are having so much power and influence, and it seems quite success as well. And I'm wondering if I'm following your thesis that the weakening of the nation state, and if we take into consideration the economical situation now in Europe, and people are in discussions of whether the European Union has a future, what kind of a future, and what has failed in terms of economical perspectives. And I'm wondering if state leaders in Germany and France, I guess, like Merkel and Sarkozy, were like very active now in discussions about the future of the European Union, are using this kind of like agencies and are and trying to invent those structures to find new ways to reunite Europe around security issues, for example, to find new ways for Europe to step into the future if economically and perhaps culturally the European Union fails.
I guess this development is older because if we look the upcoming of Frontex, for example, it was one outcome of the situation at the beginning of the year 2000, 2001, when we know in Europe that in 2007, I guess, there was the big enlargement. And I mean, the big powers in Europe thought, okay, what will we do? In this time, we have no internal borders, and we have a lot of new member states, and they are not able to protect the border. So we need something. We need to have influence to organize the borders in these countries. Not just asylum, the question of rights, but also in the question of how to let people out of Europe. I mean, the simple for Germany was the question. They know, okay, we have a border now and we can organize it, but with the enlargement we have no border, but we want to have influence how the border will be organized, because the people will have the possibility to come to Germany. So I think it was several political reasons to organize these kind of agency. I mean, if I have to say, Frontex is not so powerful. It's always the danger if you try to explain one agency that you make it more important than it is really. In fact, it's a really dynamic agency which is developing very fast, but till now they have a staff of 300 people, so that's still quite small, and it is not the most important actor in the border system. So we have it is the agency which tries to connect the different border polices. Also, for example, German border polices, and Germany has no borders actually. So this is the agency who try to connect and organize that German ships and German helicopters, etc., and teams can support the Italians, the Greek, or the Spanish border to protect the Spanish border. I mean, what is striking or what's interesting, I think, with Frontex, for me, it's because a kind of part of the process of integration, and at the same time, it's changing the society, because some years ago it was clear, for example, for people in Germany that, okay, what is happened in Lampedusa, or what has happened in Melilla in Spain, where we know maybe the pictures which we saw, people who tried to jump over the fences and so on, and it was, okay, this is in a foreign country, what can you do? But this is changing now. A lot of people and even social movements in Germany are working about that. And even I think it's also a story of success of social movements. And it shows that Frontex is not so powerful, because Frontex now is really tries to give us the aspect that they are respecting human rights, and even because they were playing so much, I think they have to, more than before at least, to respect human rights. And this is a kind of impact of a social movement, of lawyers, of social rights movements, which took the focus on this agency. And there was a report, a review about the joint operation in Lampedusa, and the report is claiming that there is a problem because they know that Frontex is observed in this sense, and Frontex has to respect human rights. And when the people in Africa know that there is a Frontex operation, they start to try to get to Europe, because they know it's better to be in a Frontex, to get catched in a Frontex operation than by the Italians or by other authorities. So this is maybe also a moment what Bernd tries to point out that these kinds of statal actions, they have all the time aspects which it didn't thought about before. And I think the history of the, let's say, social movement about the European border and about Frontex is successful, at least because the majority of the people in Europe think this is okay. We have to defend our way of life. But even in this situation, it was possible to have some success to, yeah, okay.
Okay, at the back next to Gabriel, it's the second to last question, and then we will talk more broadly.
Okay, good evening. My name is Haydam Staff from Eritrea, 32 years old, and I have been here in Israel for the last 1 year and 3 months. I have one comment and question. It's already mentioned by a friend of us from Sudan, in Darfur. Why do not Eritreans stay in Ethiopia and Sudan and Egypt, as far as these 3 countries are a significant signatory to 1951 Geneva Convention? It's a bad news for all of you and me. We have been a perishable communities the last 10 years, whenever we started to stay in Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. Rather, it was really an open market for smugglers and political bandits in 3 countries. So that Israel is the only country in which you could arrive on foot from the third country. My question is, you have been discussing about TF5 or conditional release visa, but there are tens of hundreds of Eritreans without any visa, just they have appointment slip. So this question is posed or referred to Anat. While they have factual documents in which they can, or it can state she or he is an Eritrean. This is another indication how far the government of Israel, especially the Minister of Interior, have negligence toward Eritrean refugees. So what is your assessment towards the ministry as far as those refugees? They have documents whenever they claim that they have a nationality dispute, but they don't have a nationality dispute. They have documents in which they can state she or he is Eritrean. Thank you.
I just suggested I just say a few words to people who are maybe less familiar of this weird regime that the ministry is enacted. But the idea is that if you can prove that you're Eritrean, then you will get this conditional release visa, which, as we said, is basically nothing. It's just the right to be here, and it's a weird arrangement because it says this is not a work permit, but if you get it, your chances to get work are better. So people want this sort of visa. So what Heine was talking about, that people, first, there's several problems. First is that people come and they want to be identified and they have the documents and then they get the appointment to 2013 or 2014, right? This is one of the problems. The other problem is that sometimes people do have the document, but they are not identified as Eritreans. And that's what we call disputed nationality. And basically what the ministry will do, they say the burden of proof is on you, the refugee, and if I, the ministry, think you did not bear the burden of proof, then you're Ethiopian. Though even if you've never been to Ethiopia or there's no connection to Ethiopia, but we don't want you to be Eritrean, because if you're Eritrean, we cannot deport you, so you are Ethiopian. So that's actually what's going on. But I think my intuitive answer is, this is a system of bad faith. This, so far, we know. The solution for me is to have more lawyers. This is an issue. This is a problem, really. I mean, we run a legal aid clinic. We have 2 lawyers. We have 18 students, 19 students. That's all we have. The hotline for migrant workers have another 2 lawyers. The Anat team with another NGO, I think, when they have money, they take a case, another 2 lawyers part-time. These are all the pro bono lawyers you have in Israel for that sort of job. The other takes a lot of money, and the refugee doesn't have money to pay. If you have a lawyer, and this is proven in researches all over the world, you are more likely, 3 times more likely, 6 times more likely to succeed. And I see it with my cases. None of my clients have an appointment to 2014. I write to the ministry, I say I want an appointment, I get an appointment within 2 weeks. But I cannot handle so many cases. So one of the issues that I think, again, the social movements, and they're trying to do it, is to recruit more lawyers, to train more lawyers, and maybe the most difficult is to somehow nurture a culture of pro bono, so those lawyers would not charge $5,000 for a case. I'm sad, but I think this is almost the only solution I can see. Or, by the way, another option, and we're trying that, not very successfully, but to allow representation by non-lawyers. So, for example, the volunteers of ASSAF or for ARDC or so on will be able to take a case and handle the case without a lawyer. That would even be better. But for now, the ministry is resisting that. So it will take another high court petition, another 1.5 years of fighting. And during that time, people are without a visa, and that's a problem.
Okay, someone over there has given up his chance at the last question so that you would be able to ask a question over here. This is the last question, and I'm asking you to just hang in there a little bit longer so we can have a bit of a discussion about what next, and then we will close for the evening.
My name is Chidi. I'm from Nigeria, but not a refugee. It was a culture shock for me when I came into Israel last year, and I saw the number of African refugees at the Levinsky Park there. And it reminds me of Europe, when a lot of Africans started migrating to Europe. It became a major issue. The question is, we understand the fact that Israel has security problems, but I think the government can go a long way in even identifying the people who already came in here without documents. And if you want to solve a security situation, you must know the people who already infiltrated your country. So I'm asking this question, I'm saying, are there people who are advocates of human rights in terms of migration in Knesset? What are they doing about the number of African refugees that are here in Israel?
I came as a lawyer, but there's a lot of advocates from the other organizations, and there are people working in the Knesset and working on public opinion and working on education. I mean, there's people here from Amnesty and from ASSAF and from Physicians for Human Rights and for Association for Civil Rights in Israel. I think when Jens is talking about civil movements or social movements, I think also in Israel we can say that's one positive factor, that we have so many really talented and committed organizations that do such an important work. I think it's a long-term effort. I mean, we are not succeeding in overturning public opinion either in the street or in the Knesset yet, but this is maybe part of what we're going to talk about now.
Okay, thank you. So, to bring us back, we had two different questions, but more or less I think around the same topic of what next. This conversation will continue on Tuesday evening, but maybe we want to kick it off now. So, ideas, thoughts, inspirations. Anat, I think you wanted to maybe somewhat address the question of what next, and perhaps you want to restate the question just to trigger our minds again? In the grid. In the grid.
Thank you. I just ask, as we know the situation here, and all of us, we understood that the government is trying to build a detention center and even to have defense in the border. My question is, like, what is the role of human rights organizations in terms of the people that are living here, like people are already here? Thank you.
Responses from the audience. 1, 2, 3. Here in the front. I'm just reminding you, let's stick to this topic. Let's try not to stray from it, okay?
I wonder what would you think, to be realistic. Israel is saying that, I mean, it's also a question of sponsoring, of money. So if the RSD process is going to cost a lot of money because you have 10,000s of asylum seekers who needs to go through this process, so one thing is to get the European Union or UNHCR or UN or some sort of an international body helping with having Israel, advocate for Israel to ask for specific contributions from the international community for the RSD process. That's one thing. And then also, and then of course, having the international community helping with the other aspects of the obligations under the convention, in particular healthcare and housing and other rights that Israel does not provide. What do you think about that? Do you think that it is realistic to advocate in the Knesset, maybe the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or something, to ask for the international community to assist with those processes that are costly?
I want to teach us a nice tool that's, wow, that hurts. That's nice for a group discussion. When you hear a suggestion, when you hear a recommendation that you like, you put both hands up in the air. I will only do one, otherwise the microphone will fall. And you wave your hands like this, if you like the suggestion. I think it's a useful tool. It gives us a sense of how people are feeling. And we will be taking notes to move us forward in this discussion. So the suggestion was, can we, if the RSD, correct me if I'm wrong, if the RSD is going to cost a lot of money, who can we ask and who can we lobby to bring this money that we would need to do RSD on a massive scale to Israel? More or less? And how do we feel? What do we think? So if we like it, what do we do? What do we do? This. I don't know, you guys, what's going on? We don't like it. You don't like it? They don't like it. Okay. I had over here, and then afterwards I'll come to you, Mika.
Thank you for organizing these events. And I'm going directly to the questions, but we need to mention two things. The good things in Israel is its army. I don't know if you agree with me, but the army is doing a good job regarding the asylum seeker, people who cross the border. at least better than politicians and everyone. So the army challenged the government and let the government at least to know what human rights is and what, so that is the model of the army that we have in the Middle East, or the new, I don't know. The other thing is free education for the kids. Our kids in Israel study free, excluding kids in Eilat. We have very strict law in Eilat that our kids not going to school. But in other parts of the state, in Israel especially, I work with kids and it's very nice to see all these kids involved and integrated in with the kids of Israel. I know Anat talk about the gradual change since 2002 until today, and that lead me to see why this gradual change, especially in the Israeli society, is a social phenomenon. If we, this one thing. The other things about, RSD, I don't think the question is questions of money of RSD. The question is, because we, as B'nai Darfur organization, we submitted a proposal in 2009 to the government, and we just submitted a proposal to see what the solutions, what we thinking the solution going to be for the refugee. So the question is, these organizations, I know there's two organizations working very hard, they have some solutions, especially refugee clinic and hotline for migrant workers suddenly changed to also to deal with refugee issue, and they have some idea, proposal trying to send to see. So all these things coming together with another NGO, we should try to find a way, coalitions to see how we can propose. We're missing one thing in this meeting. We're missing the IGO. So we need IGO also to be part of this kind of discussions, especially the internal governmental organizations. We need them to be part of this because, this is education, to teach them the way of thinking. So some of them, they don't know really the law, They know in Israeli law since 1948 and today. They don't know another things. They know Ben-Gurion say something, so that's going on. So maybe we need to study more, to educate more ourselves and people who work in the Ministry of Interior, because they are citizens and they are part of the community, part of this NGO. So this is what we miss. We need to include it in our next work together. The other things for the RSD, these new organizations, it is, Israel want to be part of the, Europe, that they are dealing with the refugee, but they adapt the things that Germans have, but in a different perspective, right? A refugee is supposed to live in different parts of the place, that in Germany, yes. If we think this is a global phenomenon, the issue of refugees, so we need to integrate more people, and we need to work with the Israeli community, because today the society is different than in 2007 and 2008. So the street today is different than the street in 2007. So we need to work more on that. Even Haaretz, before the speak, this brought a lot, but today we need to know how Haaretz, how can interpret the issue of refugee. Thank you.
Okay, I heard I see waves, hands waving. Can I see them all at once? Yay, okay. Mika, you have noted down those suggestions and the fact that we had a lot of waves. I see people fading, I see people drifting out slowly, and we will slowly drop from 10 to 9 to 8, and then we will be only the three of us here on the stage. So I want us to close for today. Thank you so much for being here. I hope it was interesting. We hope it was useful, and we really, really hope to see you on Tuesday.